Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Ashtottara Sata Sri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mayi Ki Jai Jamuna Mayi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaura Premanande. Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna, and welcome everyone for Srimad Bhagavatam with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami and friends. It is Wednesday, October 16th, 2024 in New York, and we are picking up with our reading of Srimad Bhagavatam in the fourth canto, sixth chapter of Brahma Satisfies Lord Shiva. Tonight, starting with text number 50, likely finishing chapter 6, and then starting chapter 7 at some point. Maharaj hasn't contacted me letting me know that he's not going to attend, so he may yet, unless he's what's the word? Something that unexpectedly in transit somewhere. That's the word I was looking for. So sometimes I looked at his schedule and he's expected to be in transit in a couple of days, but he may be unexpectedly in transit. Hare Krishna. Anyway, thanks everyone for being here. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Srimad Bhagavatam 4.6.50. So this is the last part of Lord Brahma's address of Lord Shiva, in which he's praising Lord Shiva, offering respects, instructing all the demigods to also be respectful. And now, after he's offered these prayers of respect to Lord Shiva, as is commonly seen in the pages of the Bhagavatam, we'll see what he'll present in more direct way, what his desire is. We see this is the activity of great souls, that when they approach someone with a desire, first they offer great prayers, praise, respect, and then, and only then, do they actually ask for what it is that they're looking for. Not like in contemporary society where we just say, hey, can you do this for me? Can you do me a favor? It's much more respectful, much more refined, much more conducive to spiritual happiness. So Lord Brahma is speaking these last verses of chapter 6. Kurvadvaras yodharanang hatasya bho tvaya samaptasya mano prajapate nayatra bhagam tava bhagino daduhu kuyajino yena mako niniyate. My dear Lord Shiva, you are a shareholder of a portion of the sacrifice, and you are the giver of the result. The bad priests did not deliver your share. Therefore, you destroyed everything, and the sacrifice remains unfinished. Now you can do the needful and take your rightful share. Looking here at what Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, slightly different translation. O Shiva, revive the incomplete sacrifice of Daksha stopped by you, in which the bad priests did not offer you your share, so that you can receive your share. In his commentary, he, as he often does, gives some subtext or some conversation that we're not privy to, but that he reveals for us. What should be done now? O Shiva, Manoho, revive that sacrifice of Daksha which was stopped before completion by you, in which the evil priests did not give you your share, so that you can attain your share. So Prabhupada doesn't have any commentary there. So text 51. Jivatadya jamano yang prapadyetakshini bhagaha brighosh mashruni rohantu pushnodantascha purvavat. My dear Lord, by your mercy, the performer of the sacrifice, King Daksha, may get back his life, Bhaga may get back his eyes, Brigu his mustache, and Pusha his teeth. Devanam bhagnagatanam Ridvijang chayudhashmabihi Bhavatanu grihitanam Ashumanyostvanaturam. O Lord Shiva, may the demigods and the priests whose limbs have been broken by your soldiers recover from the injuries by your grace. Eshate rudrabhagostu yaduchisto dvarasya vai yajnaste rudrabhagena kalpatam adya yajnahan. O destroyer of the sacrifice, please take your portion of the sacrifice and let the sacrifice be completed by your grace. Here Prabhupada has considerable purport. A sacrifice is a ceremony performed to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 2nd chapter, it is stated that everyone should try to understand whether the Supreme Personality of Godhead is satisfied by his activity. In other words, the aim of our activities should be to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just as in an office, it is the duty of the worker to see that the proprietor or the master is satisfied. So everyone's duty is to see whether the Supreme Personality of Godhead is satisfied by one's activity. Activities to satisfy the Supreme Godhead are prescribed in the Vedic literature, and execution of such activities is called yajna. In other words, acting on behalf of the Supreme Lord is called yajna. One should know very well that any activity besides yajna is the cause of material bondage. That is explained in Bhagavad Gita 3:9. Yagyartat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha. Karma bandhanaha means that if we do not work for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, then the reaction of our work will bind us. One should not work for his own sense gratification. Everyone should work for the satisfaction of God. That is called yajna. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I thought we could pause there. The subject matter of the purport changes paragraph by paragraph here, so I thought it was worthwhile to stop here. Prabhupada is at the beginning of this purport. He's referencing Sangsidhir Haritoshanam. It's the 2nd chapter in the 1st canto, the Dharmasvanustita Pungsam, that whatever activity you're engaged in, the goal of that Sangsidhir, the perfection of it, is Haritoshanam, to satisfy Hari, the personality of Godhead. And then conversely, one's activities they have no value if their own attraction for serving the lotus feet of the Lord is not awakened. That verse is also there. So then the question may arise as we read this purport. He says in many ways and in many times the aim of our activities should be to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So then, how do we know? It's a logical question. How do we know? Like he says again, the aim is to see whether the Supreme Personality of Godhead is satisfied by one's activity. So how do we see that? How do we know if what we're doing is pleasing to the Lord? And the initial answer that came to me, and I'm sure others can expand at much greater length and depth than I, is yasya prasada bhagavat prasado yasya prasadam nagati kutopi, that one pleases the Lord by pleasing his devotees, specifically his representative, the spiritual master. I was reading in the purport to the last verse in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada makes it very plain that when one associates with the devotees of the Lord, that is association with the Lord. It's not a different thing. That's how we associate with the Lord. And so if our activities are pleasing to the devotees whom we respect, admire, and want to emulate, not just everybody, but everyone has a certain group for which they aspire for their fellowship. They want to be accepted by a certain group of people, a certain type of person, a certain type of devotee, especially in our case here. We aspire after their not only association, but we want to be accepted by them. We want to be affirmed that we're okay. This is, of course, true in any kind of social situation, because we are social beings. We want to be integrated socially. And so we, for example, businessmen have their acharyas, musicians have their acharyas, etc. And for us, everyone's individual. One time, His Holiness Jayadvaita Maharaj was saying to me that you can choose your friends in Krishna consciousness. And of course, that's true on many levels. I take it to mean that there is a certain type of association for which we aspire and for which we want to emulate and become ourselves. There were many Vyasa Puja ceremonies during Prabhupada's manifest presence, where as the devotees in person were offering homage to Prabhupada, those close to him could hear him saying, as in response to their praise, almost under his breath, not audibly into the microphone or to be heard by everyone, but taking note of all the items of praise being offered to him. And he would say, you become, you also become, you become, you also become. So when it says here that everyone's duty is to see whether the Supreme Personality of Godhead is satisfied by one's activity, that's what it means. We have to act in a way that is pleasing, congruent with the desires of those devotees whom we admire and respect and want to emulate and be accepted in their group. So, any comments or questions so far before we move on? Panchatattva Prabhu is driving. For all I know, Radhesha Prabhu could be climbing a tree. And so eager to hear from any and everyone tonight. So I'll pause for a moment and then move on with the rest of the purport.
I have one comment, if I may.
You may.
I really liked what you were saying. You know, how does one know if the Supreme Lord is pleased? And you said, well, you know, if the devotees are pleased, specifically the spiritual master. But then the question comes, you know, how do you know if the spiritual master is pleased? And one thing Guru Maharaj said, that he asked that question to Srila Prabhupada. It was basically, how do I get my brownie points for the service I'm doing for my spiritual master? You know, how does he know that I'm doing service? And so Srila Prabhupada told him the face is the index of the mind. Everyone will be pleased. You'll be able to tell that the devotees. So it's basically what you said, but I'm just giving an example from Jayadvaita Maharaj's experience asking Srila Prabhupada that question. And sometimes it's not so vague as we think. Like, how do I know if people are pleased? You can tell as you go about your services. You can tell if people are pleased with you. You know, they're joyful to see you. They're excited to engage in service with you. They don't run away when you walk in the room. You know, it's clear that your service is pleasing to those around you. So I just thought I'd add that.
Thank you. Yes, and as you were speaking, it occurred to me that, well, what if there's nobody around you? What if you're performing some variety of solitary bhajan and you're at some lonely outpost? Then what came to mind immediately is that when the Lord is satisfied, everyone is satisfied. And that means that you'll be satisfied. It's a fact that the individual has the greatest capacity to fool himself. And so we can imagine for a time that we are doing right, if in fact we're not. But we will feel genuine spiritual happiness and satisfaction if indeed we are performing yajna tat karmano nyatra rather than karma bandhana, because we'll be happy. We'll be satisfied. We will be averse to wasting time. We'll be averse to sense gratification. When sense gratification goes down, self-realization goes up, and the converse is also true. So even if nobody's around, if you're performing sincere devotional service, you yourself, by the grace of the Lord, will be happy. Radhesha Prabhu, I see you with your hat. More to say? All right. Moving on with the purport then. After the yajna was performed by Daksha, all the demigods expected prasad, the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Vishnu. Lord Shiva is one of the demigods, so naturally he also expected his share of the prasad from the yajna. But Daksha, out of his envy of Lord Shiva, neither invited Shiva to participate in the yajna, nor gave him his share after the offering. But after the destruction of the yajna arena by the followers of Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma pacified him and assured him that he would get his share of prasad. Thus he was requested to rectify whatever destruction was caused by his followers. Just pausing there for a moment, it occurred to me that during this address of Lord Brahma to Lord Shiva, reassuring him that you can now receive your share of the sacrifice, and Prabhupada here says that he would get his share of prasad. It seems to me that Lord Shiva is so fixed in his own bhajan, his own meditation, his own service to Lord Vishnu, that it would not seem that he's so self-interested, that he's really so keen even to get a share of any sacrifice that may be going on anywhere. He's so self-satisfied that just it almost seems unnecessary for Lord Brahma to be bringing this up, because Lord Shiva he's Lord Shiva. he's not upset if he doesn't get this or doesn't get that. He's completely Atmarama. But nonetheless, Lord Brahma is making all these points in an attempt to pacify Lord Shiva. So certainly he's going to bring up these very basic points about the nature of the sacrifice. And Prabhupada is expanding all that for our own understanding, those of us who may not have such a rich background of understanding the intricacies, pros and cons, benefits, detriments of proper and improper performance of sacrifice as he's doing here. Thus, he was requested to rectify whatever destruction was caused by his followers. Interesting also to see that Brahma is directly addressing Lord Shiva here, and also directly, I won't say blaming Lord Shiva, but he's essentially saying that you destroyed the sacrifice, even though it was Lord Shiva's followers, Virabhadra and crew, who actually did the job. It was Lord Shiva's desire, even though he was at a remote distance. Hare Krishna. Anything to discuss here before we move on with the rest of the purport? All right, we shall move on. In Bhagavad Gita 3:11, it is said that all the demigods are satisfied when one performs yajna. Because the demigods expect prasad from yajnas, yajna must be performed. Those who engage in sense gratificatory, materialistic activities must perform yajna, otherwise they will be implicated. Thus, Daksha, being the father of mankind, was performing yajna, and Lord Shiva expected his share. But since Shiva was not invited, there was trouble. By the mediation of Lord Brahma, however, everything was settled satisfactorily. So here we have the beginnings of ISKCON resolve, Brahma acting as mediator in this great dispute. And here Prabhupada does say that Lord Shiva expected his share. It's natural. That's the natural outcome of the sacrifice. Everyone gets the result of the yajna. Yeah. He says here, those who engage in sense gratificatory, materialistic activities must perform yajna, otherwise they will be implicated. Implicated means, as we read previously, karma bandhana. In other words, then you may do something expecting to get the result, but if that activity is not referent of higher authorities from whom you must get benediction and whose mercy you are dependent on, if you think you can just please yourself by some miraculous arrangement of some universal Amazon.com with unlimited Prime bonus points, you will be sadly mistaken, because the results of such activity will fall on your head, and you'll have to pay a very large bill indeed at some point. But Hare Krishna. To finish the purport here. First of all, let me make sure we didn't miss anything from Srila Vishwanath. No, not yet. The performance of yajna is a very difficult task, Prabhupada says, because all the demigods must be invited to participate in the yajna. In this Kali Yuga, it is not possible to perform such costly sacrifices, nor is it possible to invite the demigods to participate. Therefore, in this age, it is recommended Yajnai Sankirtana Prayayar Yajantihi Sumedasaha. That's 11th canto, chapter 5, text 32. Those who are intelligent should know that in the Kali Yuga, there is no possibility of performing the Vedic sacrifices. But unless one pleases the demigods, there will be no regulated seasonal activities or rainfall. Everything is controlled by the demigods. Under the circumstances, in this age, in order to keep the balance of social peace and prosperity, all intelligent men should execute the performance of Sankirtana Yajna by chanting the holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One should invite people, chant Hare Krishna, and then distribute prasad. This yajna will satisfy all the demigods, and thus there will be peace and prosperity in the world. Another difficulty in performing the Vedic rituals is that if one fails to satisfy even one demigod out of the many hundreds of thousands of demigods, just as Daksha failed to satisfy Lord Shiva, there will be disaster. But in this age, the performance of sacrifice has been simplified. One can chant Hare Krishna, and by pleasing Krishna, one can satisfy all the demigods automatically. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th canto, 6th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Brahma Satisfies Lord Shiva. This reminds me, I was hearing a class by Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu. Other devotees have spoken on this also, but he was speaking specifically about Vedic mantras and the extensive rule sheet one must follow in order to properly chant those mantras. It has to be done the right time of day, facing the right direction, by the right person, who's born in the right family, who's performed all the right rituals, yada, yada, yada. It's an exhaustive list of qualifications is required in order to properly chant Vedic mantras so that there will be the desired result. And that's why Prabhupada makes the point again and again. There's nobody qualified to do that in this age. And therefore, Lord Chaitanya has made this whole process of yajna extremely simplified. Just chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And then he says, by pleasing Krishna, one can satisfy all the demigods automatically. You wouldn't want to risk, as Daksha did, if one fails to satisfy even one demigod out of the many hundreds of thousands of demigods, there will be disaster. We don't want disaster. Our lives are short enough. Let's chant Hare Krishna and get on with it. Hare Krishna. Nor is it possible to invite the demigods. Yeah, we're disqualified in so many ways. Kalera dosha nidhe rajan asti hieko mahadgun kirtanan eva Krishna syad mukta sangha param vrijet. Just out of all the bad qualities, it's the only good quality. That just by chanting the name of the Lord, you can go back to Godhead. Mukta sangha, you become freed from all material bondage, which is extraordinary. Hare Krishna, Radhesha Prabhu.
We have a intimate little sangha here, so I just had a thought that I wanted to share. That I was pretty sick about 6 months ago, and all I wanted to do was listen to an audiobook, and I threw on the Odyssey. And when Odysseus starts, not cursing the gods, but just kind of saying, I'm so capable, I'm so powerful, I don't need you. And then he goes through this huge trial, this huge tribulation. And I was kind of reminded of that when I heard the last line of the purport, the failure to please one demigod, just to incur the wrath of one of them, just makes your life so difficult. And how fortunate are we that we're not, that our philosophy isn't Greek mythology, that our philosophy isn't any sort of mythology, that by pleasing Krishna, we really do overcome all of these obstacles. And it's such a relief. Otherwise, all of our lives are just the same as the Odyssey. You're just beset by one difficulty after another, and it just feels hopeless and difficult. And it's so nice that you get to chant Hare Krishna and everything is rectified. So I had that thought. And I had one other. I really appreciated as you were reading the purport, the last verse, Ashu Manyostvanaaturam. There's a atura is a common phrase in Sanskrit, like chitta, atura chitta, a disturbed mind, an agitated mind. So the request is, please, Lord Shiva, Manya, you're very angry, but can you relieve this anxiety? Can you relieve these difficulties? But Srila Prabhupada specifically writes in that paragraph, he says, can you undo what your followers did? And I really like that, that even though they're in the right, when things are rectified, hey, you're still in charge of them. Can you sort of help, pull things together, give people back their mustaches and teeth and beards, and, sort of relieve the anxiety and put things back in proper order so we can continue as things are. I just really like that comment from Srila Prabhupada, because it takes the statement from relieve our anxiety, our atura, take away our difficulties. Srila Prabhupada, maybe he took it from Vishnu Chakravarti, I'm not sure, but he takes it one step further, not just relieve our difficulties, but revert the things that were destroyed, put them back in proper order. So I really liked that.
Yeah, and the word for word, he directly says anaturam, recovery from injuries.
Oh, so, there you go.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
Srila Vishwanath says he simply healed. Anaturam means healed. And before, when I was speaking of Gopi Pranadana Prabhu, I meant to continue with what he was saying, was that when we say Nam Namakari Bahudana Jasarva Shaktista Trapita Niyamata Smarane Nakala. So when we're chanting the Hare Krishna mantra now in the age of Kali, the special thing about it is that there are no restrictions of any kind. That's for chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Anyone from any walk of life, crickets can chant Hare Krishna. There's no restriction in that way, and which it kind of has to be that way in Kali Yuga, because everything is so degraded. It's so run down that if there wasn't a special dispensation like there is, what would be the hope? There would be none. So, Hare Krishna. So it looks like we are about on the edge, poised, as it were, to start a new chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is entitled The Sacrifice Performed by Daksha. So this is the happy ending after all of the armed conflict. Want to see if there's someone else who can do some reading. I should probably rest my voice for a bit, but let's see. I don't know who is able actually right now. People are in the field of duty.
I mean, I'm just on my phone, but I don't mind reading if it helps you.
It helps me.
All right. I might turn off my camera though, because I know if I flip my phone around, then I end up sideways. So I'll just turn off my camera and I can start with the next verse.
Yeah, a couple of verses. The verse 2's got the purport.
All right. 471. Maitre uvacha ityajena bhavena paritushyata abhyadhaya mahabaho prahasya shruyatamiti. The sage Maitreya said, O mighty armed Vidura, Lord Shiva, being thus pacified by the words of Lord Brahma, spoke as follows in answer to Lord Brahma's request. Prahasya, smiling. Mahadeva uvacha nagham prajesha balanam varnayenanuchintaye deva maya vibhutanam dandastatra dhrito maya. Lord Shiva said, My dear father Brahma, I do not mind the offenses created by the demigods. Because these demigods are childish and less intelligent, I do not take a serious view of their offenses, and I have punished them only in order to right them. There are two types of punishment. One is that which a conqueror imposes on an enemy, and the other is like that a father imposes on his son. There is a gulf of difference between these two kinds of punishment. Lord Shiva is by nature a Vaishnava, a great devotee, and his name in this connection is Ashutosh. He is always satisfied, and therefore he did not become angry as if he were an enemy. He is not inimical to any living entity. Rather, he always wishes the welfare of all. Whenever he chastises a person, it is just like a father's punishment of his son. Lord Shiva is like a father because he never takes seriously any offenses by any living entities, especially the demigods. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Gurudasa Jayadvaita Swami Namani. This verse hits home for me. As a father, it's easier said than done to not feel anger, especially at your dependents, at those in an inferior position. My older boy, he's only 6 years old, but sometimes he can really find a way to agitate to such a point that one might lash out in anger, either physically or with words. And it behooves us to control those emotions. If we're properly situated, then we don't become offended. Let's see, what's the word used? We don't become nagham, no offense is taken. And wow, Deva Maya Abhibhutanam, for those who are deluded I don't become offended. Anuchinta, I don't consider the offense. So this is real power, is that when you're actually in a position of control, if you're actually in a condition of power, then you're not anuchinta. You don't consider these things as some great offense. You don't stoop to the level of a child, bala, someone who's less intelligent. Srila Prabhupada, he's speaking to me in this purport, because I know every once in a while I do stoop to the level of my son. I become 6 years old in my own consciousness, and he'll do something to agitate me, and I react, Maruti, what are you doing? I start yelling, and then I have to apologize after. I have to say, hey, I lost my cool, but this isn't proper behavior. But Shiva, he's not losing his cool. He's in control at all times, especially in this pastime. I know there's other pastimes in which he's tested by Bhrigu Muni. I know he, at least for the pastime's sake, loses his cool. So he's quick to anger and quick to be pleased, but he doesn't hold on to things, and he's not taking the insult of the demigods very seriously. He's let it go already. His anger is pacified. He's peaceful. So we can take this into our own lives and be similarly peaceful, especially by those who are deluded. When we go out and preach, sometimes people can react violently to our preaching. I know in Nimai and the Mouse, sorry I reference it so much, but we're reading it a lot. The mice go out on preaching and they're attacked. They're accosted by some other mice. And Chota, he tells the others, he said, Lord Nityananda was also attacked. We have to tolerate, because we recognize that these other living entities, they don't have the great fortune that we have. So we can tolerate and continue our preaching endeavors. So the whole world is acting on this childish mentality of sense gratification, which really is quite childish. What is that in Gita? Pravadanti na pandita. A wise person doesn't act in this way. In two places, it's stated. One is when Arjuna is lamenting unnecessarily, and then later Sankhya Yoga Pratak Bala, Pravadantina Pandita. When you see a difference between Sankhya and Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, then you're a fool. We see Pratak Drishta. You have this difference of vision, and people have this difference of vision. Sometimes even interfaith. Some Christians will be fighting with Jews, or even ISKCON devotees might get into it and say, oh, we have to get into the scrabble and fight for our religion. But these different sorts of faiths are external consideration. The real measure has to be one's dedication to God, and not to agitate those who already have their spiritual convictions. You can just try to add the Maha Mantra. And when others become agitated, then we don't have to take it so seriously. So forgive my very long-winded explanation, but these are some thoughts that came to my mind.
We're grateful for all of your long wind, Prabhu, no doubt. Srila Vishwanath just has some, as he often does, his own sweet take on things. And he really seized upon this word, what is it? Balanam, of the children. Lord Shiva clearly sees all the demigods as children. And he says, in his commentary, it says, I do not speak about or think about the offenses committed by children, those controlled by the Lord's Maya. I punish them to teach them, just to teach them. And you see that example also with Srila Prabhupada. He sometimes would become very angry to the point that people in the room with him would turn white as a sheet and not be able to even bear the force of Prabhupada's anger. And people that were not there would think themselves very lucky to be spared the full force of Prabhupada's anger. But he's only doing so in order to teach. He has no personal desire. He's just the representative of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he wants to get things done. And he wants his disciples to imbibe that same spirit. So sometimes force is required to get a point across. And Lord Shiva, just to teach them, just to teach the children.
Do you know Guru Kripa, Prabhu?
I know of him. I've never met him in person. I've seen him several times. I know some
So
pastimes of his, but yeah.
he's an old Hawaii devotee. I've been quite close with him my whole life. My father used to work for him, and I grew up with one of his children, or maybe he just has the one daughter. In any case, he's a very rough character. He's very nice to those he likes, and I've always had a cordial, nice relationship. But he's very rough, and I believe the story of how he joined was even that he wanted to go beat up these weirdos, and then somehow he got pulled into the service. Next thing you know, he's a stellar devotee, very dedicated to the process, very dedicated to Srila Prabhupada, and he's not a softie. He's a very tough guy. And there's a story where Srila Prabhupada wakes him up, I think in Mayapur, and he wakes him up at some ungodly hour, or very godly, depending how you look at it, something like 1 a.m. And Guru Kripa comes in and he's exhausted. I think at the time he's a sannyasi. And Srila Prabhupada says, oh, some service, can you do this or that? And he was very honest. He said, Srila Prabhupada, it's like 1 a.m. I'm so tired. I need to sleep. And Srila Prabhupada said, why do you need to sleep? You're in Maya. And he said, I don't know what to tell you, Srila Prabhupada. Okay, I'm not a pure devotee. Srila Prabhupada kept digging in why you are not a pure devotee. And it didn't matter how he tried to wiggle out of it. Srila Prabhupada would corner him. And pretty soon he started crying. And this is, for those of you who know Guru Kripa, for Srila Prabhupada to make him cry is a very, I don't know if it's humorous or just spiritual power. It's something amazing that he made Guru Kripa cry. And after making him cry, he gave him some hot milk, read him Krishna book, and sent him to bed. So it's like taking care of children. But Guru Kripa tells this story, very fondly. And one of the ways he uses the story is that he said that sometimes he would be scared to go see Srila Prabhupada, because it wasn't, this image of Srila Prabhupada is just this all-embracing, very loving spiritual master who accepts all of your faults, is very different from the image painted by those who are very close, in which he could be very cutting, Guru, very heavy. And so Guru Kripa Prabhu said that, if Srila Prabhupada were here now, it wouldn't be the kind of thing where everyone's just rushing to go, bask in his effulgence. No, it's like, it's an intense experience to be close to such a personality. And I can imagine that in spite of Shiva's, great sweetness, and we see how easily pleased he is here, I'm sure it's very intense to be in the presence. And, if you fall foul of the line, the repercussions are so severe, one has to be very careful. And so similarly with Srila Prabhupada, and when you brought up Srila Prabhupada in that context, I immediately thought of Guru Kripa crying and being sent to bed with a hot glass of milk and Krishna book.
Yeah. And that first sentence of the purport, it gives us in light of what you just said, it helps us to understand the mentality of Lord Shiva, any great devotee, Srila Prabhupada, showing the clear distinction between that sort of behavior and intent. And as he says here, two types of punishment. One is that which a conqueror imposes upon an enemy. And of course, the devotee of the Lord thinks that he has no enemies. He's simply acting for the benefit of others. The devotee feels pain when he sees the ignorance of others, and he wants to eradicate that ignorance. He has nothing but love and good wishes for that other person, but he wants that ignorance to go. So I can well imagine the scene as you're describing it. Thank you very much. We have a little bit of time. I was going to say if perhaps Venkatesh Prabhu could read a couple more verses that move the narration along. We can find out the exciting things that happen next and how Lord Shiva reacts to Lord Brahma's requests. Is that possible, Venkatesh Prabhu? If not, is Panchatattva Prabhu still driving? If not,
I can read.
oh yes, please, Mataji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Guruji.
Hare Krishna.
प्रजापतेर्दत्तशिष्णु भवतु अजमुखं शिरा मित्रस्य चक्षुषुक्षेत भागं स्वं बर्हिषो भगः. Lord Shiva continued, since the head of Daksha has already been burned to ashes, he will have the head of a goat. The demigod known as Bhag will be able to see his share of sacrifice through the eyes of Mitra. Next verse. पूषा तु यजमानस्य दत्तिर्जक्षतु पिष्टभुक् देवा प्रकृत सर्वाङ्गा ये मा उच्छेषणं ददुः. The demigod Pusha will be able to chew only through the teeth of his disciples, and if alone, he will have to satisfy himself by eating dough made from chickpea flour. But the demigods who have agreed to give me my share of the sacrifice will recover from all their injuries. The demigod Kusha became dependent on his disciples for chewing. Otherwise, he was allowed to swallow only dough made of chickpea flour. Thus, his punishment continued. He could not use his teeth for eating, since he had laughed at Lord Shiva, deriding him by showing his teeth. In other words, it was not appropriate for him to have teeth, for he had used them against Lord Shiva. Next verse, we'll stop here.
Did you have anything, any comments, Mataji? Any thoughts, any ideas based on this?
I could not get from this third verse. The demigod known as Bhaga will be able to see his share of sacrifice through the eyes of Mitra. The context of this one, I did not get.
Well, Bhaga had his eyes put out. So,
Okay.
And Lord Brahma had originally negotiated to have his eyes put back in, but it seems that Lord Shiva has his reasons for all of the specific in things that happened, and so that arrangement, Bhaga seeing his share of sacrifice to the eyes of Mitra, must be some high-level arrangement that Shiva had figured out that was most appropriate for Bhaga somehow. I don't know why, but yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Yes, Prabhuji, you can please share your thoughts.
Well, it's almost amusing to see how Lord Brahma is satisfying Lord Shiva with prayers, requesting that things be put right, that the sacrifice be reinstated, that all the personalities have recovered from their injuries, have Bhaga get his eyes back, Pusha get his teeth back, Brigu get his mustache back, etc. But Shiva has further negotiations. And so he says, for example, this business of Pusha showing his teeth against Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is, in one sense, the father of all created beings in the material world. So, as we see, what he says is what's going to happen. What he says goes, as we say in America. So, if Pusha doesn't get his teeth back and has to eat through the chewing of his disciples, that's the way it has to be for some reason. He better get used to eating chickpea flour because that's all he's going to get. So it's in one sense very heavy, and in another sense, because it's not my teeth, it's somewhat amusing. But I shouldn't unnecessarily use my teeth, lest I be similarly cursed.
Yeah, and others who had to be silent because of obligation to Daksha, maybe they were still spared from this punishment, the long-term punishment that others are getting who grossly offended Lord Shiva.
Right. He specifies that those who were not of a pritag drish mentality against me, they'll recover. they'll fully
Mm.
recover.
Yeah.
So he evidently has significant powers of cognition, almost akin to that of the indwelling super soul, that he knew the intentions of everyone, even though he might not have been even physically present, as we see. I mean, he was at a remote distance, and nonetheless, all of the injuries inflicted were very specific and unavoidable. And now after it's all taken place, he's saying, yeah, I know this guy was thinking this and this guy did that, and that's why this has to be like this, but these people, they can recover. So he's extremely, extremely powerful and cognizant personality. But thank you so much for reading and commenting. It's 7:57, and so somehow we have reached the end of our hour again. And Mataji, if you'd like, you can lead us in our closing kirtan, unless that's for some reason impossible for you. That would be nice.
Yes, Prabhuji. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्री प्रभुपाद की जय जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय नमः श्रीदास ठाकुर जी जय प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपिनाथ श्याम कुंद राधा कुंद गोवर्धन की जय श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय श्री मायापुर धाम की जय गंगा माई की जय यमुना माई की जय भक्ति देवी की जय तुलसी देवी की जय समवेत गौर भक्तवृंद की जय निताई गौर प्रेमानंद हरि बोल
Hari Hari. Well, thank you so much, Mataji, for the kirtan. And thank you everyone for being here for Srimad Bhagavatam with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami and friends. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami Maharaj and friends ki jai. Thank you so much everyone for being here. hopefully we'll get to see Maharaj tomorrow. I'll send him a note to make sure everything's all right and find out if there's any unexpected travel, or sometimes power outages are there in Johannesburg. In any case, thank you again so much for being here and for all your participation. Jai Jai, Namaha Namaha, Hare Krishna.
Jai. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Thank
Prabhu.
you,
Hare
Lord.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Kendra Prabhu.
Jai Jai Jai.
Haribo, Haribo, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Kante Prabhu.